The Hogsty presents It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and Rich Rogers. And now, here's your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business, part of the Hogsty Network. This show we talk about the business, the dollars and cents, the media going on of all of the sports and sport business that we love. I am your host, Chris Larry. I am joined by my two compatriots. Say hi, fellas.
How is everybody doing? This is Steve. Very happy to be here talking about sports as always. It's, our passion certainly on this show, and we hope it is on your. We hope it is for you too as well. Can't get my words out tonight. The beauty about this show is we have all sorts of topics that comes from a variety of the sporting world, and that certainly is true today. So I'm excited to get started.
Hey guys, how you doing? It's great to be here. Really excited. We got some great topics today, and let's get going.
All right, we're going to get at a lot of different topics today, so we go in a little bit machine gun style, so let's rat-tat-tat right our way into it. First, a little international intrigue. It was floated that given Qatar's recent troubles with international politics, terrorism, and Middle East goings-on, that their World Cup bid may be in jeopardy. Steve, you want to give us the quick intro on this topic?
Sure, yeah. There's no quick intro to this, in terms of the Qatar World Cup bid, and I thought it was very interesting because of all the dynamics. What has recently happened, though, is that Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the UAE and Bahrain have actually severed political ties with Qatar on the allegation that they are supporting international terror groups. Now, just as background, Qatar is seen as one of the most liberal of the Middle East countries out there. There's a gigantic, very important U.S. military base there. I've never heard specific allegations against the Qatari government like this before, but that is what has happened. The background in this is what's interesting to me. If we go back to a couple years ago when Qatar won this bid originally, if you recall, everybody, that the United States actually sent former President Bill Clinton to be the symbolic head of the nominating committee or the bid committee years ago, and the allegations were that the country of Qatar actually bribed their way into getting this bid awarded to them. So there's a lot to it, and there's a lot more into it. There's weather problems in Qatar. It's 130 degrees there in the summertime. They have no infrastructure for this whatsoever, and there's allegations of slavery and indentured servitude going on with the construction of the facility. So this is just the latest in a string of hits that have come at the 2022 World Cup for Qatar. It's very interesting.
I found that very interesting. I think with Qatar and, other countries backing out, there's kind of sort of a pot calling kettle black with some of these countries that are pointing the finger at Qatar, where they all have, you can maybe trace some terrorist ties to some of these countries, specifically Saudi Arabia. But, I'm interested. 2022 seems like a long way away. It may not be, but just given the current political climate, who knows what's going to happen. So it's just something to watch.
It's not a very long way away, really, when you have to construct all of the facilities. And I think you're exactly right about Saudi Arabia. We're not breaking news here by saying a ton of terrorist money comes out of Saudi Arabia, even if the royal family pretends that it's not true. It is true. Excuse me. And so it's truly the pot calling the kettle black. And I think there's clearly something more going on here than all of a sudden Saudi Arabia and Egypt grew a conscience. They haven't had a conscience before. Go ahead, Chris.
I got to jump to Qatar's defense on one thing. isn't bribing FIFA officials just how you get things done in international soccer? We're suddenly going to blame them for what is normal operating procedure?
Well, you're right, of course, and the reason why I thought this World Cup story was interesting was the Qatar thing with the politics is interesting, but what I really wanted to highlight was the corruption in FIFA, which is what you're getting at. People need to remember that it wasn't a year ago, or was it 2 years ago? That the FBI investigated and arrested 15 separate, basically all the FIFA executives that they could get their hands on in the United States, under allegations of collusion and corruption and bribery and all sorts of things. It is a corrupt organization. There's no two ways about it. There was flat out bribery in this Qatar thing. Honestly, I've said this before, and I'll continue to say it. I'm all for inclusion, right? The true spirit of the World Cup. I'm not a huge soccer fan, first of all, in terms of watching the game, but the true spirit of the World Cup to me is the idea that all countries can come together in the spirit of inclusion to celebrate humanity in the form of sporting competitions, right? That's to me, and so generally speaking, you got to move it around. You can't have it in LA every time. I get that. But at the same time, you can't pick a backwards third world country it's 130 degrees with no infrastructure. It makes no sense.
It's interesting. It's interesting. I don't know if you guys were living in the area when the World Cup was here in DC, and
I was.
yeah, when I drive to work, there actually is still some of the signage on one of the interstates that guide you to RFK Stadium. So. There are still some remnants of the World Cup here in the district.
Yeah, I remember, walking around downtown D.C. and seeing people with all sorts of flags from all sorts of, countries and all over the place. I mean, and that's all a good, very good thing, right? We can all set aside our differences. But at the same time, and the International Olympic Committee is guilty of this too, because, Qatar is, I don't want to get too political here, but Qatar is a Muslim country. It's a Muslim caliphate, just like all these countries. Qatar, along with all these other countries, do not support Israel. There's been open conflict for 2,000 years between Muslims and the state of Israel. I don't know how good Israel's soccer team is. I have no idea. What happens if the Israeli soccer team qualifies for the World Cup? Is Qatar going to even let them come? Number one. Number two, what if there's obviously going to be LGBT people, both players and participants and fans, who want to come either play in and watch this World Cup. Well, those things are penalized by death in some Middle Eastern countries. I don't understand how you can award a country that hates Jews, generally speaking, and does not support the idea that LGBT individuals can, live, and you're going to give them the World Cup. I don't understand it. I'll never understand it, except that it's just flat out corrupt. Flat out corrupt.
Well, there's a long history of these kind of international sporting events going down in those, places that were in deep political unrest. The 36 Berlin games oversaw by Hitler. The United States and Soviet Union playing footsie over boycotting each other's Olympics. So, it's not like these kind of international sports stages haven't overlapped with these kinds of issues in the past.
Yeah, and I realize that, but all the same, this is pretty far out there, though, isn't it? I mean, it's one thing to give. I mean, it's sort of in comparison to giving the 36 games to Hitler, in a sense. That was before World War II. It was before combat started, but he had those ideas. I'm not saying the United States has to have every game, but I think in general, it's a good idea to have the World Cup and the Olympics in countries that, number one, don't have to spend billions of dollars in infrastructure to create it from the ground up, only to abandon it a week after the games are over. And two, let's have a country or host these games that doesn't want to kill Jews and homosexuals. That would be a good start.
I think it's a slippery slope when we start pointing. I mean, I think you make a good point, Steve. I think it's a slippery slope when we start pointing fingers at countries for their I guess, alleged ethnic atrocities and relating it to being awarded games, because someone could come back and accuse the United States of some things that we may not see. And I'm not suggesting that any of that is true, but certainly to the international community, we may not be immune to some of those accusations as well.
And that's fair, right? I mean, we have our racial problems here, but the federal government does not have a policy of killing people for racial divide, right? We're trying to solve our problems and we're trying to do the best we can, but we're not trying to kill people over it. There may be crazies.
Right, no, I understand.
I think it's different. The other thing I want to point out about this is, in case anybody doesn't, for all you military folks out there who've been in the Middle East like I have, this, but they're not building these soccer facilities in Qatar via straight up and honest private companies who are paying people living wages. They're using what essentially amounts to indentured servitude and slavery, and people have died building these things so far. It died and been ignored. These countries like Qatar and Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and all these countries in the Middle East basically go in what amounts to almost kidnapping in countries like Nepal and Pakistan and India, and promise these people a better life, and then they charge them an obscene amount of money to bring them to Qatar and Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, and they don't pay them at all. It's almost slavery, and that is what is going on in Qatar to build these, to build the infrastructure necessary for this World Cup. It is unbelievably offensive to me that the international soccer community has actually stood for this, and it's only because of money and because they were bribed.
Are you saying OSHA does not have jurisdiction over labor practices in Qatar?
I know. I wouldn't want to go there if I was an OSHA guy, that's for sure.
The one thing that's interesting, and then we'll probably move on in our machine gun topic rundown, is that, the International Olympic Committee, Steve, probably came around to your line of thinking recently when they just made an announcement that they will probably announce the next two Summer Olympic hosts at one announcement, and that they will most likely be, wink, wink, LA and Paris, and there's some jostling about which one comes first. So that's the International Olympic Committee to me saying we basically want 8 to 12 years of no stress, knowing that the Olympic Games can come off without that bad publicity, or right up till the week before wondering if all the venues are going to be.
And that's coming from a string of China, Russia, and Brazil. At least Brazil wasn't openly corrupt. They just had deathly contaminants in the water, and so that, I don't know if that's progress or not.
Well, we don't think Brazil was openly corrupt.
Well, that's true. You're right. You're right, Rich.
Yeah.
Or above the base level, corruption that's on any construction site.
They're not openly advocating killing people, so I think that's progress over Russia and China both.
All right, so our next topic is one that if you are a regular listener, you will recognize as a bit of a ongoing topic, and that is the adventures in As the LeVar Ball Family Turns, or this week in the LeVar Ball Watch. Lots going on with Ball Sr., and it all seems to be ramping up as the NBA season winds down and we go into the offseason, which is where his intrigue will skyrocket. But everyone's got to have a hot take on this guy now, right? Just because he's in the news on almost a daily basis. So everyone has an interesting take, and we've looked at kind of the entrepreneurial take. We've looked at the kind of, media attention grabber take. But we read a take this week that was a little bit interesting. It kind of came at it more like a compassionate parent sort of fighting for the rights of his very talented children. Is that a new and different take on LeVar Ball?
It is a different take. And what you're talking about is an article in MMQB, which is Peter King's Sports Illustrated vehicle, but this is written by Andrew Brandt, who is a former agent, and he was in the front office of the Green Bay Packers. And we've, had our fun with LeVar on this show. We acknowledged, that he probably has a bit of genius in him over this shoe thing, as long as his son can actually play basketball. And certainly LeVar has had his issues, with insulting the female, the female co-host, of the herd with Colin Kaepernick. But Andrew Brandt's take on it was very interesting, and I wanted to get you guys' opinion on it. Andrews, said that LeVar Ball is really no different than a whole lot of other people he's ever seen. The difference is just he has a platform. You know, he calls it in the article that the whisper crew. He says every player has a whisper crew. That's the parents, the brothers, the sisters, the friends that are all around him and all want things from the player, and everybody's trying to get money. And that the agent typically has to be the no guy, in Andrew's experience. But what's different here is that LeVar Ball is doing his son a justice by being the no guy for him. What Andrew has said is he has not seen any of this whisper crew around Lonzo Ball at all. And it's because his dad is there, and his dad is actually, for being, even though he's such a loudmouth, he's protecting his son's interest by keeping all the flotsam and jetsam away. And I thought that was a very different take on it than I've seen.
Yeah, and that's interesting. You all made a great point when we started this segment about, and I think it's a fair question in terms of how is LeVar Ball any different from any other quote unquote helicopter parent / agents. And I think I go back to, and it's not quite the same thing, but I think Archie Manning and with Eli Manning gets a huge pass and how that all went down, actually being drafted by the San Diego Chargers and sort of willing his way out of going to San Diego and going to New York. I don't think that he has caught enough heat, but that obviously is 2 Super Bowls later, and I don't know how many years he's played in the league. But to your point, I think that sort of makes the point that there are others that do this. I think the issue with Ball, and I like Brant's take, is that he's just a loudmouth. And people prefer people to be behind the scenes and humble. And nobody likes a loudmouth. And sometimes people do it for entertainment value. Sometimes people do it to push their brand. And I don't doubt that he is either. He's not both. But I have a problem. I don't have a problem with him making sure that his son gets all that he is due, but he's just a loudmouth, and I just personally don't like loudmouths. There are other ways that you can do it.
Yeah,
It's interesting. The thing that I think is most analogous of what LeVar Ball is doing is something that is a pretty well-worn stereotype at this point, but we don't see as much in sports, and when we see them, they're maybe out in front, and that is the stage parent. The last 30, 40, 50 years of TV and movies is littered with child actors that had parents that were managing their own dreams, were milking those kids as clients. There's a total pop cultural meme around the destroyed child actor. And I think it's just because we don't see them. They're not in the movies. They're not on the television shows. You can see the Williams' dad, or you can see Archie Manning, you can see LeVar Ball on the sideline in press boxes, kind of doing real-time coaching or career management. But LeVar Ball's just he's just Lindsay Lohan's dad, 10, 15 years ago, essentially.
Yeah, without the drugs, of course. What's sorry about that. No, he analogized this in the article to John Thompson at Georgetown. And obviously John Thompson isn't a loudmouth, and he's a much different person individually. But what he said was, when you dealt with Georgetown people, the client was really John Thompson, and Thompson clearly had the best interests of the players in heart. And for all of LeVar's faults, that's the same as what he's doing for Lonzo, just in a different way. But I think part of the controversy with LeVar Ball, and it's hard for me to have the same perspective on it as some others. I think it's race based in part, for better or for worse. Because LeVar Ball is he's a loudmouth black man, right? That's what he is. And a lot of the way he speaks and a lot of what he does is based in urban culture. And I don't think white folks understand it. And I think some of them they can't relate to it, and so they don't like the guy. And I'd ask Rich, what's your opinion about that? Is how, am I right? Am I wrong? Do I have a point?
You know, Steve, you made a great point. I think that America does not like, and I want to say this also, because I don't think it's just exclusive to whites, but many Americans do not like loud, opinionated black men. They find them threatening. I think that they're, and I'm not speaking for all whites, so I'm just going to say from my experiences, what I've heard is that you should be humble, you should take what's given to you, and you should be meek, and you should say thank you, and you should go sit in the corner, and you should do it in one particular way. And I think that when you have people like LeVar Ball, there are many people, and not just white Americans, there are many African Americans that don't like LeVar Ball, including myself. Yeah. So, yeah. But I think you make a great point that anytime there is any type of pushing an envelope in society by a black man, anytime there's that, look at me, see me, it's a very polarizing lightning rod topic. And I can equate it a little bit to Cam Newton, in that Cam Newton is loud. He's braggadocious. He's photogenic. He's always in the camera. And there are many people that don't like that. They prefer their athletes to be humble. Mm-hmm. Give the ball to the referee and go sit down. So I think you have a point there. I think that is worth exploring a little further at another time.
I want to bring that on. I don't want to generalize, on the whole thing, but I think it's the elephant in the room to a certain extent about LeVar Ball. I think in the way he's treated by the media. The final thing I want to mention about this is, Brant talks about how the UCLA basketball coach, who's Steve Alford, was complimentary of LeVar in that he said. LeVar's completely stayed out of his way. He let Alfred coach Lonzo, was never a problem. It's completely different than the stories we've heard coming out of high school with LeVar and LiAngelo, and I forget the other kid's name. But he's saying that Brant thinks that when Lonzo gets to the NBA, be it the Lakers, who's the running favorite right now, or some other team, he thinks LeVar's going to back off and let the pros do their job. Remains to be seen. Don't know.
The one thing I'll say, and I don't think this is contradictory to the race frame on this, but it's maybe it's actually additive. It's pretty fascinating too. One, if you read the ESPN the magazine story on the family, it's pretty clear they're of middle to upper middle class background. Yeah. So there's a class narrative here as well, and this is where I think it actually mixes. Rich, with your take and yours, Steve, in that we're very used to seeing pushy helicopter parents. I mean, they literally have parent onboarding and orientation in Fortune 500 companies now. So you're talking about people coming out of Ivy League schools and upper echelon schools going into their entry-level lawyer or Fortune 500 jobs where they have to have onboarding classes for the parents.
Didn't know that.
So it's actually... From a class perspective, he's doing what seems to be the norm in terms of pushy, aggressive parents doing everything to get a leg up. You mix that with the race thing, and it's a heady cocktail there. But in reality, he's probably, if you take race out of it and look at his class peer group, he's probably pretty much the norm. Obviously, different stage, different talent set, but still the norm in terms of the actions of a parent.
Yeah,
if you look at
go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at it. There's not, the big piece to me, there's no one way to advocate for your kid. You've got some people that do it behind the scenes and they work they work back channels, they work connections, and you never hear about it. Then you've got your LeVar Balls. So there are many different ways. Some people identify with some rather than others. It just depends on what your point, vantage point.
Yeah, I mean, number one, it's obvious LeVar Ball's, he's certainly upper middle class at a minimum because you don't fund a clothing line and shoe line without any money, and so he does have money. I don't know what he did for a living before his sons, but I throw RG3 out there, and I think it's time we got to move on here, but RG3's parents were just as involved in their son's career, maybe former career now, as LeVar Ball's parents were. So the difference was they weren't obnoxious about it, but they moved to Washington, D.C., They were in the building. They got criticized by the media by being too involved. They got criticized for being too friendly with Dan Snyder, and everything else. And so I think it takes all kinds. It's just LeVar Ball is so out there that he's so polarizing that he's gotten a lot of attention, unwanted attention that he brought on himself, quite honestly. So.
All right, so we'll be coming back to this topic. Like I said, it's kind of a given on our rundown every week, and with the draft coming up, and I think there's also some lawsuit now about his actions in a nightclub. So I'm sure we'll have other opportunities to do as the LeVar
as the ball turns,
Ball family turns,
as the ball turns.
As the ball turns. There we go. All right, so another topic, the ESPN and ABC, was it Capital Cities? Is that Disney?
Disney,
now, right?
yeah.
Disney, the parent company of all of that, has announced that Hank Williams Jr., for you Hank Williams fans, is very distinct from his father, Jr., is being welcomed back to the Monday Night Football culture with his "Are You Ready for Some Football" song. Now, you might remember that I don't remember, maybe 3-4 years
2011.
ago. That did, before, geez Louise, that's 6 years ago. Cut ties with Hank because of some racially charged comments he made about, at the time, President Barack Obama. And, he'd been a long-term kind of conservative firebrand, but apparently this went one step over the line, and he was dismissed from his job, and then that song went by the wayside. Well, it's coming back, and that brings back a lot of interesting topics and storylines here. So I'm just going to throw this red meat out there, and are you ready for a Monday Night Football song debate?
I don't care what song they use, first of all. Use whoever. Use Carrie Underwood. Use Hank Williams. That's not why I watch Monday Night Football. I frankly don't understand why ESPN's putting so much effort into it, because I don't think it really matters. I don't think they're, we talk about media a lot on this show. I don't think they're attracting viewers because of the song. And I don't think they're making money because of the song necessarily. I think it's odd they're going back to Hank Williams. Specifically, what he said was the comment that got him fired was that he said President Obama playing golf with former House Speaker John Boehner was like Hitler playing golf with Netanyahu. Just totally unnecessary, completely ridiculous. I get super offended when you compare anybody to Hitler because it's so outrageous, because Hitler killed millions of people. That's what got him fired. I don't think it's a big deal to me, but I was never really offended by Hank in the first place. You just take him for what he is, a beer-drinking country guy, and, try not to get too wrapped up over their politics, and I'm fine with it. I just think it's very odd that ESPN would all of a sudden come back to it in a sense of nostalgia, maybe. I don't know.
I think it's actually a brilliant move, and I think that a business move. That was... I'm all for it. I try not, everything is so, politicized nowadays, and I just need something, maybe 3 hours where I can depoliticize whatever he said. I don't offend easy, but I'm not suggesting, and I think your point is well taken, about his comments were not good. I just think that, the NFL has to have something signature. So you look at ABC and, Brent Musburger, You Are Looking Live. I mean, everybody knows that's college football. Back in the day, and I know you guys are probably in my same age bracket, although Chris, you look about 10 years younger than I am. But you think back to the Wild World of Sports. The music, everybody knows that music. Yeah. The thrill of victory, the agony of defeat. I think they need a signature, something that you can stick and stay with. Everybody knew Hank Williams Jr.
Yeah.
And, I liked it, actually. His, are you ready for some football? I mean, that was ready.
I mean, from a musical perspective, I think his version was by far the best. Carrie Underwood never did it justice, ever. I think musically, it's always a Hank thing. But sorry, Chris, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Well, I think to Rich, to your point, let's remember that when they made the move, which seems like ancient history now, but it was kind of like, sacrilegious. When they moved Monday Night Football from broadcast television on ABC to cable television, ESPN, the bridge was the song, because the song had been on ABC's broadcast probably for 10 or 15 years at that point still already. So that was the connector. That was the glue that connected the legacy. No one really cares. It's the same parent company, right? Which, so really it was just a cosmetics to them, but it helped bridge that move from broadcast TV for an institution like Monday Night Football to go to cable, the former horse racing, tiddlywinks, all night poker, channel, which a lot of people that have been watching sports for 30 or 40 years still kind of thought of ESPN as at that time even. So that showed the power of the song.
Night poker channel, by the way, if you catch them at the right and wrong time.
That is still there with Norman Chad, old Washington Post guy.
Norman Chad, yeah.
Yeah. So that to me is pretty iconic, and I can see why they're going back. What I find fascinating is just what it portends for the culture at large and what things become back in and out of vogue and acceptability. So I don't think it doesn't surprise me in a larger cultural context, and it means that we are probably looking for the return of Kathy Griffin, Bill Maher, and Reza Aslan in about 5 to 6 years. So I think it's funny, as we vilifying certain people, we see the former 24-hour news cycle villains cycle back into their own jobs, and it kind of gives you a cyclical sense of it all.
Well, I think if one thing is true about the American entertainment consumer, is that all things are forgiven with time. And I personally, I was deeply offended by the Kathy Griffin thing. I thought it was wholly inappropriate. It wasn't funny. It wasn't a joke at all. It was nothing was remotely good about it. But at some point in time, Kathy Griffin's going to be back on a stage, and she's going to have her audience. I would just like to give a bit of advice about this Hank Williams Jr. thing to the public at large. It's Steve Thomas to the world. Just enjoy it. Just enjoy the 3 hours. You said it, Rich. Enjoy the song. Enjoy the 3 hours of football. And don't worry so much about it. Did Hank say something inappropriate? Yes, he did. Is he a redneck, beer-drinking, white guy who's probably thrown a dart or two at a picture of Martin Luther King in his time? Probably so. But, let's just enjoy the time with football and not worry so much about it and get so much wrapped around the politics of absolutely everything.
Yeah, that's why I watch football as an escape. Well said.
The man can't be a total hater. He had Bootsy Collins in his Monday Night Football band.
And I was kidding about the Martin Luther King thing. I don't know if he's a racist or not.
Funny.
Yeah.
That was funny.
All right, so we'll see if this topic raises in intensity when we scream towards the kickoff of the football season, but God knows we have a long time between now and then, so we'll wait on that one. But sticking with the National Football League, kind of look a little bit at this Colin Kaepernick situation. Colin Kaepernick still has no football team. He has no uniform. He has no position or role in the National Football League, which, if you look at it on a pure football metric, it's ridiculous. If you look at the second and third string quarterbacks across the league and who gets recycled chances, I think Josh McNown is about to be a starter for like the 19th time. So there's obviously some non-football reasons why this guy is not competing for a roster spot as of yet. Let's discuss.
So Colin Kaepernick, the buzz on Twitter and the buzz around is that when people are trying to convince themselves that Colin Kaepernick is not that good and he doesn't have a job because he sucks. And a friend of mine made a list of all the second and third string quarterbacks in the league, and it was just who's that kind of list of journeymen. Yeah, who's who of who's that. And Colin Kaepernick, the Colin Kaepernick situation is interesting in that I do think that there are some racial tinges to it, but from an NFL business standpoint, let's look at it this way: the NFL has some momentum from the public and from the owners, and the NFL feels it may be in their best interest to not have Colin Kaepernick in the spotlight of a starting NFL position. It's not like this is Cam Newton, of a guy who is very popular and you could not deny his talent. Colin Kaepernick, just look at him. he has an afro. When he talks is not necessarily. I mean, he doesn't say anything threatening, but Colin Kaepernick, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, looks like what many people, not all, what looks like many people would find threatening. There have been many comments about how he should be thankful. If he doesn't like it, he needs to go to another country, which I find is absolutely reprehensible. I think that this, when people say, well, he should just, be happy and don't disrespect, and there are other ways that you can do it when this country was built on dissent and this country was built on protest and disagreement. I don't think Colin Kaepernick was being disrespectful to the military. I think the part that people have blinders on about is that he actually was protesting and had feelings about the excessive force and police brutality allegations in many cases that were throughout the country, which has been totally lost in the discussion. So he actually, his constitutional right of freedom of speech is present. But personally, I think that many whites don't like it. You be happy, you make millions, you find another way to protest, but don't disrespect the anthem. But there are absolutely thousands of NFL fans every week who are totally drunk, sometimes falling up during the anthem. What do you guys think?
Well, yeah, first of all, those people don't have a platform of where millions of people are watching them, and I do agree that it's disrespectful, of the fans, for some of the things they do during the national anthem in stadiums, and I, for one, am one with my hand over my heart, when the national anthem's playing. As far as Colin Kaepernick goes, I'll just get out there that my perspective on this is skewed. I was deeply offended by his protest, and it wasn't. I understand what he's protesting. That's not the point with me. I understand he's protesting police brutality. He has a point there, and with some of the things that the police have done going back, honestly, hundreds of years in the United States. He has a point, and I respect his right to say it, and I agree with the nature of his message to a certain extent. But to me, thousands of people have died for our flag, and to me, you don't ever respect it. You don't ever disrespect the flag. You don't disrespect the national anthem. I think he should have found another way. And as far as the NFL goes, I think it's undeniable to me that he has talent. I don't think he's not a pocket passing franchise quarterback. He's not ever going to be that. He doesn't have that in him. But he should be on a roster purely from a talent perspective. There's no doubt. He's uber athletic. He's got a rocket for an arm. He proved that in a certain system he can succeed. So that's not the point. The point to me is that I think it's a matter of cost versus benefit to NFL owners. I don't think anybody's colluding on this. I don't think he's being blackballed necessarily. I think it's simply that there may be a handful of owners out there who won't sign him no matter what. 4 or 5 of them maybe. But I think for the most part, the issue with Colin Kaepernick is he brings a whole lot of media attention. And for whatever we individually feel about it, there's millions of people out there. There's half the country despises the way he protested what he protested. And that comes along with signing Colin Kaepernick. And so you bring a lot of unwanted attention, and you bring a lot of negativity from the fan base to a team that signs him all for a backup quarterback. It's one thing if he was a if he was a starter and a franchise quarterback, he'd be on a roster no matter what. You'd find some GM would get up there and talk about, well, he has a First Amendment right and blah, 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 and we respect it, and he's going to start. I.e. Ben Roethlisberger. Ben Roethlisberger got accused of sexual assault 5 or 6 years ago at least. But, he never got charged with a crime for it, but he's a franchise quarterback, so the Steelers instantly overlooked it. And if Colin Kaepernick had that kind of talent, which he does not, he's good, but he's not a passing franchise quarterback. If he was, this wouldn't be an issue. He'd be on the roster. But because he's not, it brings way too much negativity to a team, not to the players, but from the fan base to the team. And this is a business thing. Owners don't want to alienate half of their constituency and half of their customer base. It's not worth it to sign them for it. I think that's really the heart of the issue, rather than all the owners are getting together and somehow colluding and blackballing him. I don't think that's happening to him.
I think it goes back to something you said, Rich, on the last topic, which is that at this point, the NFL is fighting for every eyeball and every dollar from an entertainment perspective. And anybody that is going to be so in the face of their product as an entertainment product and divert the narratives that they want to set is seen as dangerous. So I think that's one, and that's where you're at right now, where even some of the controversy around whether the point of why he was protesting, the process and methods that he used protesting have somewhat gone to the background. He's just seen as toxic and toxic to an entertainment property. You know, it's gotten to the point where I'm not even sure we're remembering all the details of his toxicity. But we just know that he's toxic. And it's hard to separate him out in my mind, and maybe this is my homerism. It's hard to separate him out a little bit from RG3 in that they were very linked. They were going to revolutionize the game. You know, their first couple seasons were magical. And we also have a culture at large, especially when it has tinges of racial politics and politics at large, that wants to tear down as fast as it builds up. And there was something about the radical change. I mean, remember those 2 years, all the articles, all the ESPN, the magazine cover stories, all of the NFL quarterbacks will never be the same. The game is revolutionized. The game is changed overnight. Well, I think when those guys fall on hard times, whether it's their own actions, their injuries, their decreased play, there's a real institutional backlash against images of things that we don't necessarily want changed. And so that's hard to put one finger on, but it's pretty remarkable to see those two quarterbacks. And there's others, so I'm not saying they're the only ones, but those are the ones that said quarterbacking will look radically different by 2018. And here we are in the 2017 season, and neither of them will probably be on a roster or matter on a roster, even if they end up on one.
Well, I think, Mike Vick. Oh, sorry, Rich, but real quick.
No, go ahead.
I think Mike Vick is relevant to the discussion here. Mike Vick undeniably did something worse than Colin Kaepernick did and then RG3 did, in that he was convicted of a crime and he served prison time for it. He was convicted of a federal crime, went to prison. It wasn't a federal crime. I'm sorry, I believe it was a state crime, wasn't it? Anyway, he was convicted of a felony, and that felony was revolved around dogfighting. But he got out of prison. He was immediately signed by the Philadelphia Eagles, and the Eagles were willing to put up with a ton of backlash at the time. They had protesters. Every city they went, they had the media criticizing him in certain circles everywhere for it. Vick personally was criticized, and the reason why they put up with it is that Mike Vick was a generational talent. At least he was viewed as such. He ended up being the starting quarterback of the Eagles for several years and did fairly well. Colin Kaepernick is not viewed as that kind of talent by the NFL talent evaluators. I'm not talking about, Chris, Rich, and Steve. The guys who actually know what they're talking about don't view Colin Kaepernick as a starting franchise quarterback like they did Vick. Otherwise, I promise you all this stuff wouldn't be an issue.
So let me say this, Steve. The one thing I'll have to sort of respectfully disagree with you on is collusion. The NFL is still a good old boy network, and all to me it takes is a phone call, drinks at owners' meetings to say, well, what do you think about the Colin Kaepernick issue? I would not put it past the NFL owners for a minute that there's collusion going on. It just all depends on the dollar and public interest. They have the backing of the public to keep him out for at least, forever. But let me say this, and I just want to say, and let me just say this disclaimer ahead of time. I am in no way comparing Colin Kaepernick to Muhammad Ali. But Muhammad Ali went through something very similar when he did not go to the Vietnam War. And that was a very emotional issue in this country. and it cost Muhammad Ali money and fans. And from things that I've heard and researched, there are many people that did not forgive him for that. All of that to say, I think that there is a faction in this country, particularly with owners, that, in my opinion, Colin Kaepernick is being punished. And they have the wherewithal to punish and say, we're going to deny, just like Ali, we're going to deny you an opportunity because of your beliefs. We're going to deny you an opportunity to make a living, and we're going to deny you this platform to further, quote unquote, what they feel that their agenda is. So I'm saying, I think it's collusion 100%. And I have to applaud, and as much as I hate the Eagles, I have to applaud Andy Reid and the Philadelphia Eagles organization for taking that leap on Mike Vick.
Yeah, again, it all comes down to talent at the end of the day. I'll respectfully disagree with you about the collusion thing, and this is the lawyer guy coming out at me, because to me, collusion is, a group of people coming together and mutually agreeing to, in this case, exclude a player. And I don't doubt the owners have talked about it, but I don't agree that they've all.
Well, are you saying you disagree that it is, or you put it past the owners? You don't think that they could be that sinister?
Oh, I think the owners could be that sinister. I don't think they are in this case, because again, I think it all comes down to talent at the end of the day. I don't doubt that some owners have talked about Colin Kaepernick, right? I don't doubt that. The owner of the Falcons has talked to the owner of, the Vikings or something, in passing about it. I don't think the owners are colluding about it. I think they just see it as this guy isn't worth the trouble. He isn't worth the trouble for anybody, for any of them. It's, because his talent does not lend itself. He is a talented player, but from a quarterback perspective, the style of his play does not lend itself to where the NFL has gone for quarterbacking. They just don't want to deal with it. And I think that's what it is for me. And as far as Ali goes, the difference with Ali to me is that Ali actually was convicted of a crime. Was he not? I mean, he dodged. Was he not? Am I wrong in that?
Yeah, no, he was actually going. He was actually supposed to go to jail.
And he did not.
Was it? He was.
Yeah,
he was a conscientious objector.
Yeah, but there wasn't the conscientious objector. And I believe what happened, and I may be wrong, unless somebody out there correct me. I think he was convicted, and the conviction was reversed by an appellate court. I think is what happened, and that's completely different than Colin Kaepernick here. Colin Kaepernick hadn't committed a crime. He's just ultimately he made a protest that was, in my opinion, inappropriate. In my opinion, a lot of people. So I think that's the difference between Ali and Kaepernick. But I don't think there's collusion so much as owners just don't see the guy as worthwhile from a football perspective.
To me, I think there's capital C collusion and there's small c collusion, and I think it's sort of where the nuance plays out here.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Maybe we will revisit this if he actually makes it onto a roster sometime around July or sometime in camp. It'll be interesting to see then.
But Chris, can I? And I know we get ready to wrap up, but I think a part 2 of this is why are people so upset with Colin Kaepernick exercising a constitutional right?
I can answer that
for an issue that he feels is important.
I can answer that. I have the.
Oh, okay. We're not going to say okay.
No, I have an answer for it. Okay. The answer is that the First Amendment applies to. The intent of the First Amendment is to protect the public from the government silencing the public from speaking out against the government. That was the original intent of the First Amendment, and the First Amendment, as has been adjudicated by the Supreme Court over the past 250 years, applies to, it protects us against governmental censorship. The NFL can censor whoever they want. NFL owners can censor whoever they want. NFL owners can tell every one of their players to shut up and you will not do this. And from a legal standpoint, there's no First Amendment issue whatsoever. Certainly Colin Kaepernick has the right to speak out. He has the right to speak out against the police. He has the right to speak out about racism or whatever else he wants to. The NFL has no obligation to let him do it at all. That's the difference. To me, it's not really a First Amendment issue because we're talking about private business at the end of the day.
This is my take, and I'll say right up, I was literally 0% offended.
I was 100% offended, and I
see,
get
there
that
you go.
out there. Yeah.
So, here's what I take. Here's my analytical take on why these kinds of protests always have this kind of backlash is because since we are, at least by a nation of laws, a secular state, and still fairly new, there's a mythos, and I don't say that derogatory. There has been an American myth around the Founding Fathers, around the wars, around the iconography of American patriotism that still seems third rail because there's a perception that it is actually sacred in a way that we aren't allowed, well, not aren't allowed, that by law we aren't sacred in the public square on religious issues. And then there is an iconography and a myth of American patriotism that takes on an element of the sacred in our national politic and national culture that I think it's akin to taking a dump on an altar. And I think that is a lot of how it's interpreted. So that's just sort of my take about, whether it's Colin Kaepernick, whether it's burning flags, whether it's other folks that have done something that is against the anthem or the flag or some of these key symbols. It usually is this white hot of a topic.
Yeah. And I think,
you're right, and as you said, we could talk about this forever, but it just goes to show, and I applaud the show for addressing this. These are issues that people need to talk about, not avoid.
Absolutely. Because you and I have completely different. You and I and Chris, you and Rich and Chris have a completely different perspective than does Steve on this, and the idea that we could talk about this and not get mad at each other and yell about it and call each other names is, I think, what needs to happen a lot more, generally speaking, about a lot of issues, but particularly about racial issues. It would really help from both sides, all sides.
And I think the pressure hasn't gotten turned up yet, injuries, etc. I think the guy's on a roster by August 15th.
Realistically, somebody's going to get hurt and somebody's going to sign him. That's probably true.
Yeah.
But it'll be out of desperation more so than anything.
Yes. And we'll probably be talking about the amazing return of Colin Kaepernick by November 15th, knowing this league. All right, so as a little bit we are wont to do, track one story we're kind of keeping our eyes on, whether we talk about it or not in the future is irrelevant, but something we're kind of keeping our eyes out for. I'll start to give my compatriots here a chance to think. For me, and I'm not the biggest baseball guy, but I am a Yankees fan, so everyone can boo and hiss.
Boo.
Are we watching? I knew it was coming. Are we watching Derek Jeter 2.0 with Aaron Judge? And is he going to help lead a bit of a baseball revival? He's got a, mixed race, out of nowhere, Yankee Stadium. He's doing something that no one since Roger Maris has done in terms of home runs at this point. And in the post-steroid era, are we seeing something special with Aaron Judge? And will he become the it guy in baseball over the Mike Trouts and Bryce Harpers, who are either boring or seen as loudmouths in their own right? So in Major League Baseball, have we entered the Aaron Judge era?
Well, I can't wait to talk about that because I can't wait to tell you how violently wrong you are about your opinion on that. I still want to talk about Super Bowls, and we're going to do that on this show because there's a lot of very interesting money topics that the public doesn't necessarily know about with Super Bowls going on. So we're going to address that in sometime soon. Rich?
So, I'm actually very interested in this Aaron Hernandez thing and how the NFL is going to handle and how the New England Patriots are going to handle this, with him committing suicide and him no longer. And I think that overturns his conviction of will the New England Patriots actually have to be on the hook to pay out the remainder of his roster bonus. I am very intrigued by this topic.
That's a good one. That's a great one. We'll have to talk about that one soon.
I would love for the New England Patriots to have to
shell out a few million bucks.
Yes. To lose something. By the way, on the New England Patriots, did you guys hear about Tom Brady wearing his 5 Super Bowl rings to a party over the weekend? It was on the Today Show this morning.
Oh my God! Did he wear a full-length fur coat with it too? I didn't see that. No,
right, but
thankfully.
All right, that was the most you'll hear about Tom Brady in the next 3 episodes. I can make a pact. All right, well that brings us to the close of another The Hogsty Presents It's Just Business. Look for us in 2 weeks. We'll be scanning the sports and business pages for new story topics for the next time. Until then, say goodbye, boys.
Hasta luego.
All right. See you guys next time.
Bye.